January is coming to an end, so let's talk about the beginning of the reading year. I don't have any specific number of the books I want to read. I don't have specific reading goals. It's not 20 books, 100 books, 500 books. It's just whatever I feel like reading this year, and I have several books I'm very excited about, and also some books that I've started in December and that I finished this January. So let's talk about those first. First one is going to be Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. I talked a little bit about it in my previous video about books, but I finished it and it did not disappoint. I love her writing style. I love the ideas that she was toying with in this book. The ideas of mortality, the ideas of premonitions or predictions, the ideas of the free will, and what if you knew that your life would end on a specific day or a specific year? How would that affect your lifestyle and your choices? Would you try to prevent that? And if so, in which way? I'm not gonna spoil the ending, but all I'm gonna say is that I was satisfied with how everything was tied together. The next book on my list of things that I've started in December and finished this month is gonna be a DNF. I wanted, because I read the first 4 ACOTAR books, I wanted to finish the series, or at least finish the series in a way that it exists right now before she publishes anything else. And I decided to try and read A Court of Silver Flames, even though I've heard some things about it that I was not excited about. And lo and behold, I was not able to finish it because about, I don't know, maybe 30% in, it started feeling very much like a fanfic. It started feeling to me as if somebody was not satisfied with the amount of smut they got in the first books and decided to write something of their own with a lot of smut. And it's interesting because there's still, even though the first ACOTAR book was published like 9 years ago or almost 10 years ago, I think, there's still so much discussion and people are still having very hot debates and very strong opinions on which book is the best. Out of the first 5 books, I can tell for sure that my favorite book is book number 2, and book number 5 just didn't do it for me. Okay, so going to another controversial book right now. I finally got to Coleen Hoover, you guys. I've heard so much about Coleen Hoover. Well, first of all, I'm a librarian, right? So I have to know what's popular, what people are reading. I was at the library retreat recently and we played a game, and one of the questions was who was the most best-selling author of the previous year. And somebody guessed Sarah J Maas, somebody guessed somebody else, and the right answer was Coleen Hoover. So based on all of that, based on the fact that some people really love these books and are obsessed and some people hate them with passion, I thought, you know what, I need to see for myself. I cannot just rely on other people's opinions. And so I wanted to read It Ends With Us. And I haven't watched the movie yet, but I'll be curious to watch it, especially now with all the drama going on. But just in general too, I'd love to see how they put the story to the screen. But what I want to say is that I went into this book without any, even though I've had all this background knowing how controversial the book is and how in general people feel like she's glorifying domestic violence, maybe in more than one book of hers, I still went in open-minded. I went in as a person who heard that this book was popular and wanted to see what is it about it that made it so popular? Because even if you hate it, you have to admit that it is a popular book and that a lot of people read it. On the very first day when I started reading it, I posted on my Instagram, and a friend of mine reached out and she's like, oh, it's terrible. This is text for somebody who's never read before, a bubblegum for the brain. So she had a lot of this very critical negative opinions about the book. But at that point, I was maybe 25% in, and I had overall a positive experience by then, so I couldn't really agree with that, especially since I've read a lot. I've read classics and I've read very simple books like that, and I feel like there is value in all of it. There is a reason why classics are classics. There is a reason why some authors get a Pulitzer Award or something else, because they're extremely talented and their works contain some inherent value that's maybe going to be preserved for years to come. But in my opinion, if you are not a super talented author, or you're a beginner author, or your prose is very simple and maybe you're not bringing anything new to the discourse, in my opinion, it doesn't mean that your story doesn't have no value. I think there is inherent value in telling stories. And a book is that. It's a story being told. It doesn't have to be a lesson. It doesn't have to be a work of art. It's a story, and some people will enjoy it and some people will not. No matter your talent, the level of your prose, your views, there are terrible people writing books that people love, and there are good people writing books that people hate. But every book, in my opinion, that saw the world is worth being in the world. The fact that it is not for you doesn't mean that it's inherently bad. And that is actually one of the principles of librarianship. It states every reader, their book, and every book, their reader. It's not about books being good or bad. It's about connecting stories to people who like these stories or who get something from those stories. Like with ACOTAR, do I think that I'm reading Dostoevsky when I'm reading that? No, but that's not why I'm reading that. If I want classics, if I'm in a mood for some eternal wisdom, I will pick a different book. But there is time for ACOTAR, there's time for It Ends With Us, and there's time for other books. And obviously people are welcome to criticize the book, right? They might find the ideas disturbing, they might find the portrayal of domestic violence not realistic and dangerous in ways. That's totally fine. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's a book for somebody who has no experience reading and doesn't know what a good book is. That's my position on that. I think there's time and place for different books in your life. And for me, overall, I was like, okay, it reads easily, so I see the appeal. It's fun and it's interesting in the beginning. And then as it gets a little heavier, I also could empathize with the main character and what was going on. And I saw it, especially up until almost to the end, I saw it as a more or less realistic depiction of the way people get lost in those relationships, and how when you're looking at your partner through those rose-colored glasses and you see all the good things in them, how slowly the bad things can creep up and get to the point where it's dangerous. Eventually, there were some moments where I agree that it really doesn't seem realistic the way Ryle behaves, but overall I feel like there were some parts of the story where the depiction was more or less realistic. And also the second story, the story with her own family, honestly reminded me like her reaction and how she was writing in the diary. I know a lot of people are hating on the diary or like Dear Ellen parts, but for me it touched on my own experience, seeing some violence, seeing something bad happen at home. It aroused some feelings in me, and so I cannot say that this book was very surface level, because every book, once you read it, gets colored through your own experience as a reader. And so once it got colored with my own experience, I felt there was more to the story than just the surface romance and stuff. So I don't know. I don't love it. I will not reread it, but I also don't hate it. If somebody asks me and I feel like that book is a good match based on their reading history, the mood they're in, what they're asking about, I would feel okay suggesting it and I wouldn't feel bad about it. So, to each their own. Now, the last 3 books of my January all are not finished yet, but they will be finished, and for different reasons. So one of them, I'm not particularly excited about it, but it's for a book club, so I need to finish it. And then the other 2 I absolutely love, and for different reasons, but I intend to finish both of them. So the first one, which honestly, based on the cover, I was like, okay, I'm excited to read this. I imagined some kind of a cute, cozy type of a book. That, I didn't realize it was memoir, that's one. I thought it was more about just human nature and character and how we can learn things from the animals, which it kind of is, but it's also a memoir. It's a memoir of a naturalist, of American naturalist. Her name is Sy Montgomery. I haven't heard of her before. I've heard about some people she mentions in the book, like Jane Goodall, but I haven't heard about her. But apparently she's like a big naturalist, and she wrote multiple books with animals as examples for both adults and children. And that is one of them, and that's her biography, a memoir. There are some descriptions that she likes to give that, although very rich in imagery, are not something that I want to read about. I'll put one example on the screen right now. I could have lived without this information. Like, I don't really want to think about it, so that was a little bit off-putting. But otherwise, you know, she seems to have lived a very interesting life, and the way she describes the animals that crossed paths with her is very endearing, and you do fall in love with those animals just like she did. So that part I do like, but I wouldn't necessarily be raving about this book to my friends. The book I would be raving about to my friends is called Ravenmaster, and it's written by the Ravenmaster of the Tower of London. He's no longer in this position, but he used to be for a long time. I think definitely over 10 years, maybe 13 years or something. So he was in this, and he had an interesting life before that, but the main focus of this book is his life with ravens, and I just absolutely adore this book. Well, first of all, I'm obsessed with ravens, and I have a raven in my story. The reason why I picked this book up was because I was very curious about ravens and their little mannerisms and things they do, how they communicate to each other and things like that. But I ended up loving it for the prose as well. He has a very fun way of describing his life, and it's just very, very engaging, and you absolutely fall in love with each and every raven in that tower, and it's just so fascinating. It's such a rich place in terms of history. It's also a tourist location, right? So every day there are like hundreds, if not thousands of people coming over. And at the same time, you have this almost sanctuary for ravens with all the love and care in the world for them, with the person who knows them, knows their character, has special bonds with some of them. And it's just all so fascinating to read about. So this book I would absolutely recommend to everybody if you're interested in English history, if you're interested in memoirs of distinguished people, if you are into ravens or birds or just animals of any kind, or if you just want to read it like a very peculiar, unusual book, because it's not every day that you meet a person whose job was to serve the Queen of England in the position of a Ravenmaster. Like, that's just, I don't know, fascinating to me. So this one I would recommend to everybody. It was so fun to read, and I'm still not done, but I'm excited to read more. And then finally, the book that I haven't finished yet, but I'm still working on, is the one I shared before briefly. It's the I Wear the Black Hat. That's a book about villains, the way people see villains in real life and in fiction, in movies, etc. And it's very interesting. It's kind of like a mix of culture and psychology and history and all of it. Just the concept of villainy, you know, what it means to be evil and why some people are evil or not, and why we perceive them to be evil or not. I am always fascinated with stories like that. I do love to learn more about how people come to be a certain way, and I'm interested in good ways people come to be, but also in bad ways. One of my favorite podcasts and YouTube channels is the channel called Psychology in Seattle. The doctor who's in charge of this channel, his name is Dr. Kirk Honda, and he comments on different things, including reality TV, by the way, if you're into that. But he also talks often about famous people, and usually people who committed some crimes, just going very deep into their childhood and, you know, the development of them as personalities, and then eventually the crimes and how it came to be. Currently, like, his most recent podcast is about Puff Diddy, you know, and he talked about multiple people like that, and it's a disturbing listen, but it's also fascinating in a way, because you get to know a little bit more about how people like that end up making those choices. For me, because I am constantly thinking about how it applies to the book as well, I like to think about it because I need this information to shape my antagonist more. And so it's more like a research read as opposed to just light reading I'm doing, you know, just for me. So if you're interested in the idea of antagonists and how you can go deeper into their psychology, that could be a good read for you. So that is going to be all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!